Hello everybody! This is my presentation over the issue of privacy. When discussing privacy, we think about how we can keep it safe and secure. I chose to discuss this issue because it is something I deal with daily, and so I will be giving you an informative presentation, and I will be discussing that privacy is becoming more difficult to obtain while using any social media. And in this presentation, I'm also going to discuss what privacy means and highlight 4 key issues involving privacy and who threatens our privacy, what purpose our privacy has for social media, and how we can protect it. Alright, on this slide, I'm going to discuss what my thesis is, and it is about how privacy is becoming more difficult to obtain while using any social media. And I'm going to go over that by discussing what privacy is, who threatens our privacy, and how we can protect it in the social media world. Alright, so this next slide, before we can discuss the issue of privacy in our daily lives and its use in the media world, we need to understand its meaning. And it's also important to understand who obtains our personal information. So privacy defined is the secluding of personal information by individuals about themselves. There's a set of 4 ideas on how personal privacy can be defined by each individual. People do not want to share all information about themselves with the world. Privacy is a variable condition. A person might want to keep certain information they share with other people, but not with others. Individuals own their personal information and should be able to control it. And when we share information with another person and set boundaries on sharing that information, we expect that person to respect our boundaries. I absolutely agree with all that information because I don't know that I'm very private, but I also want others to respect what I do put out there in the world that I put seclusively, say, like on my Facebook or on my Instagram. And I don't want others to misuse it, and I don't want the wrong people to get a hold of it. So I think it's important to know these 4 set of ideas that people have certain aspects or expectations of privacy. There's third parties involved with privacy, like Axstream Corporation, who operates more than 23,000 computer services that are constantly collecting or collaborating or analyzing more than 50 trillion unique data transactions every year. And they sell our personal information to other individuals, businesses, and governments. I know we've read about them before in our readings. And this is one of those things that's actually perfectly legal. And it's crazy that they're allowed to do this, and some of us we have no clue about why it happens or how much control they really have, but it's amazing that there's that much information they hold on us. But did you know that over the past 3 decades, privacy issues have grown, which I absolutely believe. As much as the social media of the world continues to grow, of course, our privacy continues to be something that we have to be concerned about. We have to wonder if what we're posting is appropriate. We have to wonder if the passwords we're creating are strong enough. We have to wonder if the blogs and stuff that we put on our phones, if they're secure, and the emails we check. So it's very important we understand what privacy means and how it affects us in the social media world. Alright, on this next slide, we're going to discuss who threatens our privacy. There are 2 types. There's the criminal and the non-criminal. One major threat of our privacy is from criminals. Another major source of threats is through various non-criminal who coerce us into giving up our personal confidential information for free. Factors to how this happens. Well, there's 3 violations to our privacy: technology approaches, regulations and laws, and the level of public awareness about this issue is very low. I feel like this is very true nowadays, especially since privacy is a global issue, and it's hard to know where the laws are set between each country because the internet's global and people can get on the internet for any amount of reasons, and there's no way that our law enforcement can catch everybody. So I find this very interesting. And then, of course, the non-criminal ones. It's like when you sign up for prescriptions and you forget to read the fine print, and the next thing you know, you're getting spammed with all this email, and you're like, I didn't want you to do that, but it's perfectly legal. So it's very interesting how there's just these two different types are defined in this particular issue. Okay, let's look more into criminal threats. Criminal threats are cybercrime that are cybercrimes that are on the rise. And cybercrimes are actually investigated, and who investigates them is the Internet Crime Complaint Center, or the IC3. In 2019, it received over 467,000 complaints compared to 2000 in the year 2000 of 16,814. And these losses exceeded about 3.5 billion, and in 2017 it resulted in 6 billion in damage. That's a big number, and that was in 2017. It kind of makes me wonder what it is now. So what is used during criminal threats on our privacy? Malware and ransomware. It says malware and ransomware is most crimes are committed by small groups or individuals, and some even by foreign governments. The cost of cyber crimes on companies underestimates the real cost, and the estimates are limited to the direct costs companies take, but not to their restoring their reputation and the recovery of the database. That's something I think we all overlook when cybercrime hits, criminals hit. Sometimes we forget that there's the initial cost, but what about the long-term cost? There's a lot to that reputation that can never come back. Like, I remember when Target got hit with their debit cards transactions being stolen from customers, but that was before the chip came out, and people were like, I can't go to Target now, and that really concerns them. And they used malware and all the kind of things that they could to hack into those computers. There are three major categories. So stealing private information, hijacking computers, destroying information. And we're going to go into a little bit more of that on the next page. Okay, so let's discuss more about what criminal threats are, more information to it. So there's direct and indirect. If private information is stored on the cloud, criminals can steal it. There's phishing and spyware that are used as direct threats, and because our private information exists in thousands of different databases, it is easy for criminals to threaten us in an indirect way. We even try to use firewalls to help us prevent this, and they still find a way to get into our information. There's economic and political purposes. These purposes motivate the criminals who pose a threat on our personal information. And there's hackers who are motivated. The hackers that are motivated by economic purposes hope to convert the information they steal into money. This can result into identity theft. I've actually had many friends who have been a part of that, sadly. And of course, we know identity theft is the use of key pieces of a person's personal information to assume that person's identity by utilizing all kinds of economic resources such as credit cards, loans, bank accounts, and driver's licenses. This can be devastating for many individuals who, personally are in a standing that may suffer. I got my debit card stolen once, and thankfully I have a bank account or a bank that when this happens, they can track who did it, and I'm actually not held liable. But there are some places, if you get the wrong loan, if you get a loan from them, sometimes that's not always the case, and you're still held liable. Hackers who are motivated by political purposes, they breach a company's firewall to access private information to exert power over that company. The crime is also known as hacktivism. Basically it's where someone obviously wants to attack a whole bunch of individuals and of course harm the company in some way. And they can get into someone's email, bank account, all that stuff too. Even other customer accounts, which can be very dangerous and very detrimental. There's hijacking of computers, which is the second major criminal threat. This occurs when hackers take control of your computer. Hijacking is the use of ransomware, in which hackers freeze your computer so you cannot use it. Your computer cannot be unfrozen until a ransom is paid. Normally this is done to large companies, but sometimes it's actually done by individuals. There's the botnet is another way hackers will infect computers remotely with other computers that are linked and to send out tons of spam in order to steal personal information. You know how when you might be a part of a business or corporation and they send out information to you daily saying stuff like don't open email addresses you don't recognize, don't open links you don't recognize, and some people do, and then all of a sudden they get all these ridiculous pop-ups all over their screen. Well, that's someone hijacking their computer, filling it with a bunch of spam so they can go behind the scenes and steal all your information that's personal. It's pretty scary. Then there's destroying information, which is the third type of criminal threat. This involves the use of viruses to destroy information stored electronically. A computer virus is a small code that inserts itself into a normal software program, and computer viruses are highly contagious. I think we've all been aware of this since computers came out, how easily it can be to get a computer virus. I remember my first computer I ever owned had one, and we had to completely go back to the hard reset of the computer for me to get rid of it, and then even then it was hard to come back from that. I basically had to get a whole new computer. It was pretty crazy. But did you know with all the expenses, when all the expenses are considered, the total cost of cybercrime is more than $6 trillion per year globally. That's an average of $790 per person in the world. I mean, what? So cybercrime is a big issue. It's definitely a major threat on our personal privacy, and it actually continues to grow because of those reasons I was talking about before. Sometimes law enforcement's not there, and sometimes it's a global thing that we can't reach all the people who are doing it and, you know, put punishment on them to stop. So that was very crazy to me. So now we're going to move on to the next slide. Okay, now we're going to discuss the non-criminal threats to our privacy. Unlike criminal threats, these are illegal. This is information you either know or do not realize you are giving permission to companies that allows them to access information about you that you normally think of as being private. There's different ways non-criminal threats occur. Monitoring activity like the use of cookies, collecting and sell information about you, spamming you, and controlling your experience with the digital platforms. So the next slide we'll get into more detail about that. Alright, so more into the non-criminal threats. Companies tell customers they need your personal information to help make their experience with them better. Examples are the realtors or retailers who monitor your shopping habits. I don't know if any of you use Amazon. I know I do, and they've found ways to get into my Facebook page and say, hey, you need this, you must like this. Even Walmart's guilty of it. I see a lot of advertisements now on my Facebook that are linked to a lot of my retailers that I shop with. And it's perfectly legal for them to try to convince me to buy these things. There's Netscape, who is actually an early website browser who developed cookies in 1994 to help make internet searching and buying more efficient. A cookie is defined as a tiny computer file that is planted in the memory of the devices you use to access the internet. We all are subjected to cookies. In fact, they didn't always used to have a pop-up on some of these websites that we go to, but nowadays it's more and more where they have to tell you that there's cookies and you have to either accept them or deny them before you can use the website. I've run into this anytime I'm getting into something new that I'm not familiar with, or even some prescriptions that I use on a daily basis, they're reminding me, oh, we have cookies. And what cookies, do is they use your personal information. And sometimes we forget about that. And without your permission, companies are now using digital technologies to not just monitor our internet activities, but to also record all kinds of information about us that they then sell to other third parties, such as organizations, governments, and businesses. Kind of like that Ekstrom or corporation I was talking about earlier. And then Google and Yahoo are examples of who have been collecting data from our searches for years. And they keep developing new ways to gather even more of our personal information on us through the searches, of course, that we make. And the other one that is very interesting to me is about Facebook. I use Facebook daily, and I actually knew some of this based on Zuckerberg and his core issues with privacy and him selling our information to third parties. But Facebook has been very successful in collecting everything it can about who we are and then selling it to marketers. Again, that's why I see Amazon ads and Walmart ads all over my Facebook page. But did you know that each profile page is worth about $226 in income for Facebook on average? But this amount increases to more based on the more information the user puts on their profile. That was kind of a surprise to me, but not really. It's kind of a shock, and it's not. I definitely have stopped putting as much information on my Facebook as I used to before, especially because I have children. But I'm sure that goes for people who go to college, people who put their job titles down, put where they live. I don't put any of that on my Facebook anymore. I might put my high school, but I don't put where I currently go to school at. I don't put where I currently work at. Anything that could jeopardize where I am today, that someone might threaten me, I don't give that opportunity to. And so Facebook probably doesn't make a whole lot of money off my page as much as others. I also don't have that many friends, and I'm okay with that. There's also spamming, the use of media to invade your privacy with unsolicited and unwanted messages that are designed to get you to buy a product or service. It focuses on email accounts, text messages, phone calls, and even ebooks, like the things you download from Amazon. Spamming increases each year, and profits for every 25 sales for 1 million emails sent out. That's a lot of emails. That to me sounds like it would be a lot of work, but I guess if you have the technology as it talks about, you can instantly gather all that really quick and just by a click of a button send out millions of emails a day and make a profit. That's insane to me. I know when I check my email address or my email inbox, I definitely get subjected to a ton of this. And I know there's filters now. There's actually filters that help that out, but they still don't always get caught. And they get your information by either buying it or selling / hacking it from other companies' private email list. And spammers find many unique ways to spam people and corporations. We know this if you've ever answered a spammer phone call. Unfortunately, I have AT&T, and I'm not afraid to say that part, but there was a time, and still is sometimes, that these hackers, spammers, have managed to send me a text message in a group of people I have no idea who they are, and their goal, I guess, is to get us to talk about this stuff that they're sending us, and I'm just like, no. And you can't just get rid of them. You have to get the people all in the group to agree just to stop texting you. It's very frustrating. So then next we're going to talk about controlling. The reason so many third parties collect and buy tons of our information is so they can exercise control over what we think and how we act. Search engines such as Google also exercise considerable control over our personal search requests. There's such a thing called paid placement, which is a method that they use is part of Google's search algorithm, in which companies can improve their placement with Google to present their results by paying them to be basically the #1 search. So when you go to Google something, these companies purposely pay Google for them to be the first selection. But did you know that not everyone's search is actually going to be the same, or their list results, because Google tailors our searches based on everyone's personal interests. So they've actually come out with a way now that they know enough about us on which ones they think we're going to click on and which ones they don't, and they make that list based off of that. So that's kind of scary to think about. Google's been around for a while, and I use Google a lot. And so I actually tested this theory with my husband, and he and I did get 2 different search lists. And it was just amazing to me because I never really noticed that. So I thought that was crazy that this is very real. So that's more information about the non-criminal threats, and we're going to go into the next slide. Okay, we're going into our last slide, and in our last topic on how can we protect our personal privacy in the social media world. Well, there's 2 different opinions. There's the public opinion relations, which public opinion is strongly in favor of personal privacy. But it's difficult for laws to be set in place to regulate what is distinguished as private and what is public. While threats continue to rise and become more serious, regulators and law enforcement agencies have been slow to respond adequately. We have limited jurisdictions, and they are at a crunch for law officials to constrain geographical locations outside the U.S. that many threats take place in cyberspace. And that the federal government has been slow to pass new regulations and laws to control their threats because other existing regulations and expenses that come with tracking down violators cost so much, and many criminals simply move out of the country to avoid punishment. It's amazing to me that this is such a strongly favored thing that we all want. We want our personal privacy to be protected, but the funding for it is not there. I mean, it makes sense because if you think about how much money I talked about, the $600 trillion that criminal threats pose on us, I can't imagine the cost that it would take to help protect us in some ways that we cannot do because of our jurisdictions, because of our limitations. So I hope one day that we can find a way to combat this. I mean, they're constantly in a battle with it, I'm sure. So then our real big defense, in my opinion, is that you have to form your own informed opinion on how you can protect your personal privacy on the internet or on your phone, anything that involves, the media. So there's advantages and disadvantages about this. The digital world offers so much valuable information to us that we want to put out there to get what we need. So like we might download weather apps, transportation, news, health, crime, and even resources like our grocery stores that we want to shop at. And it's hard to live in a world without so much of this personal stuff, because we rely on a lot of it. So we're going to give up a lot of our personal information to help us obtain what we want or need. And how we put it out there is on us. So it's important we read all their policies, fine print, and go over what we feel is comfortable to put on there or not, or if we actually want to use that app. And then the disadvantages, of course, is that the digital world eliminates personal privacy because of all the transactions we do make to obtain the useful information of what we need. And of course, it comes at a cost. Many of the devices we store our personal information on is substantially at risk for, hacking, spamming. There's things we have to put in place like, passwords, firewalls, fingerprints, antivirus softwares. But those can still be hacked if we're not careful. You can put a pin on your phone, but if someone sees you type it in and then they get a hold of your phone, they have access to all of your bank account information. the technology we use nowadays, it puts everything in a cloud for us, so we can log into things without remembering our password. We can rely on our, apps and stuff to recognize us based on other things that we didn't have to necessarily have before, that make it not as difficult for people to get into. So we have to be aware of those things. I know on my phone, I have my fingerprint and a PIN because I have to keep my children off of it. And even then, I don't know how they've managed to open it before. So I've had to find other ways. And if it's not locked, I have to be extra careful that they don't get into things that, again, even though I have a password to it, I can click on it and it'll say, oh, you have it saved, let's use it. So we have to know what we're doing. There's also actions that can be taken to help protect our personal information. Of course, this is in our readings. We can map out our expectations of privacy. We can ask ourselves what privacy means to us. Again, so when you use like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, how much do you trust putting on there? And do you feel like it's very private, or you feel like it's not? You got to ask yourself these questions. We have to examine whether our expectations of our privacy on these websites are being met. Can we determine what information is currently available to us? Can we search websites that have our accounts on where you frequently post things, like I was talking, like posts and pictures? Can we trust that those aren't going to be shared? We have to look into everything that we do on our phones and our networking sites. We have to see if they're constantly staying up to date with our privacy. And of course, they have rules too. And we have to understand, we have to feel like if they meet our expectations or not. Are we being consistent? Are we being consistent with information that we want shared and to the right people? Think about how much trust you have in others that you are sharing your personal information with. We also have to examine how much you can trust your internet service provider to respect your privacy. I feel like that one's actually a little underestimated because I didn't really think about that until after I read about this. Our internet service providers, like even our search engines again, like, are the websites we are using providing us with clear understandings of how they use our personal information and when using their websites? Check to see if there's opt-out options for data collections of your personal information, giving you more control over it. Think about the posts that we put, again, and it's like I said, Google can take your searches and figure out who you are and compose a list based off of that. I might switch to DuckDuckGo because I've heard that they don't do that sort of thing, and then I'm less likely to be bombarded by spams or ridiculous ads on my Facebook. So lastly, we can check for risks of invasions to your privacy to check your hard drive for cookies, limit those cookies, download software, and protect our computer from threats to privacy. Be sure to never take your privacy for granted. Continually monitor the threats that you're being faced with daily, and never give out information you don't want shared. I think that's common sense there, but there are things that, again, non-criminally, they persuade us into giving out, and next thing we know, we're wishing we hadn't. And it can definitely take a toll on you. I know I once gave out my phone number for insurance on this one website, and all of a sudden, it happened instantly. I started getting all these calls from people I didn't know, and it says spam risk on my phone now, but it would not stop. And even today, I still get calls constantly, at least once a day. I even got a spam call while recording this video. I was like, this is crazy. And I have to figure out who I've shared that phone number with to figure out if I can opt out of it. I have to go through my email addresses, unsubscribe from things that I didn't subscribe to. It's very important, and we have to think about, again, what our expectations are of these things. So I hope I gave a pretty good informative presentation to you all. I'm going to end the slide on the next slide. Okay, in conclusion, today I first discussed why I chose the issue of privacy as my topic. Then I went in and discussed my thesis statement and what I would discuss in my presentation, what the meaning is, who threatens it, how to protect it. Then I went over the meaning of privacy. I even went into third parties. Fourth, I discussed the threats to our privacy in social media, the criminal and the non-criminal. And then I informed the ways privacy can be protected. Because, again, my thesis basis on privacy is becoming more difficult to obtain while using any social media. All right, and here's my works cited page. All the credit goes to our media literacy book, the issue of privacy, and it can be talked about in our book from pages, I believe, 399 all the way to 400. Oh my goodness, it's a big one. 430. So if you have any questions regarding any of this yourself, feel free to look into it. Thank you for watching. All right, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed my informative presentation on the issue of privacy.